From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South, and I'm Sonia Gray. We begin in Ecuador, where Vice President Maria Alejandra Vizcuña has rejected accusations that she has asked for financial contributions during her time as a congresswoman. Vizcuña says she's being blackmailed.
Here have evidence. Ecuadorians have to know that this is not coincidence. Since September, Mr. Satbay has threatened to forge this statement if we don't meet the demand for charge, particularly as the governor of the Morona Santiago province, as provincial director of FtS. But as we didn't concede to this blackmail, pressure or extortion, because we are committed to transparency, today the standards are made public.
Our correspondent in Quito, Denise Herrera, has more.
According to the Vice President, Maria Alejandra Vizcuña, in a press conference, he rejected this accusation and also accused of this accusation to Andrés Páez, and also said that she will start an investigation against this accusation. Also, the President of Ecuador, Lenin Moreno, in his public Twitter account, said that the justice will find the responsibles for this accusation. It's all the information we have for now. Back to you at the studios.
Now to Mexico, where the second migrant caravan has arrived to Tijuana. 500 migrants have arrived at a shelter in the border city to join the 5,200 migrants already there, in the hope of crossing into the U.S. After a journey of 180 kilometers from Mexicali, these migrants, most of them Honduran, will be sheltered in a local sports center a few meters away from the border wall.
We belong to the second caravan. There's a lot of people in this one. We came here because there is no work back home.
We need to figure out what to do when it comes to food. Seems it's difficult. There are a lot of people and sometimes there isn't enough food, and sometimes people are left without it.
And Mexico's incoming foreign minister has said only a project the size of a post-World War II reconstruction effort could address the flow of migrants heading towards the United States. Marcelo Ebrard is due to meet the U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo on Sunday. He says deporting migrants is not a solution to the crisis. He believes the conditions that are causing them to flee their home countries must be addressed.
To regulate migration flows, first, there must be opportunities for migrants. We must promote development in their countries and respect people's rights. That's the objective of what we're promoting. With the United States, I will go with the general idea, but it's the same theory. We're trying to convince them to take part in our idea.
And members of the Migrant Caravan have made a series of demands to the Mexican and U.S. governments.
We request of President Donald Trump to accelerate the process of asylum in the United States, because everyone has the right to ask for political asylum, as my colleagues said, that a commission is formed by the new government of Mexico that comes to negotiate a presidential solution for those who want to stay here.
Today is when countries are needed to come to the rescue of all the migrants. We are suffering. We are not suffering because we want to. We need to bring our families forward. And what happened on Sunday was a peaceful march. Many people have their families back in Honduras, starving, and went out to work to feed them.
And a new migrant caravan is ready to depart from El Salvador to the United States. But this time, hundreds of Central American migrants are taking to social media to get some answers about the journey they're about to make.
I've been hearing about these caravans for quite some time. I've heard that 2 have left already. This one will be the 3rd. Another one is expected to leave later. Who knows how many more?
We are preparing ourselves because our country is in chaos. We are moving on enthusiastically, hoping we all arrive to the U.S.
But because of the difficulties in crossing into the U.S. via the border, some migrants are debating whether to remain in Mexico or to return to their countries of origin. Many of them say they do not want to die in this journey for a better life. Days after the tear gas incident, some migrants have decided that their American dream was at an end.
Because they're not letting us through. The president won't let us through. He doesn't want us over there, and there are rumors some migrants who have already crossed are being killed. I'm going home because I don't want to die either here or in that country.
Tina's capital, Buenos Aires has been rocked with a fresh wave of protests as hundreds of anti-G20 summit protesters have taken to the streets. They held banners and slogans criticizing the government and international organizations such as the International Monetary Fund, which they accused of exporting poverty and starvation to their country. The G20 meeting will take place in Buenos Aires this Friday and Saturday.
We came here to tell the IMF, that international looting fund, that it doesn't matter how many police or prefecture or gendarme force they send. We know very well who the violent ones are. We know very well who are accountable for the looting, starvation and poverty in Argentina.
Our correspondent in Argentina, Eduardo Esteban, has more on the days leading up to the G20 summit.
An intense week of activity continues. There are a number of demonstrations planned, including at the Atlanta Stadium and a gathering on Thursday at the People's Summit outside Congress. There are going to be tents, debates, forums, and open talks marking the rejection of the G20 leaders' presence. More than 6,000 attendees, including international delegations and journalists, are about to arrive, and there's severe controls in place for activists participating in the counter-summit. There are a lot of expectations for what is going to happen in the city, because whilst traffic is normal now, we're in a zone which will soon have prohibited access. There are going to be 22,000 policemen. If you recall the Malvinas War, there were 15,000 soldiers active. For this 48-hour summit, there will be more than 20,000 members of security forces in 3 zones. It's going to be impossible to get around. Airports will be closed, public services such as trains and buses are going to be interrupted, roads will be closed, the port of Buenos Aires will be closed as well. Argentina is going to be isolated because of President Macri's government's security decision. Aircraft carriers have been brought in from the US as well as planes from other countries. Israel has helped with border control. Despite warnings and repressive operations, the counter-summit is still being held. And on Friday, a big demonstration called by social organizations, trade unions, and all kinds of diversity movements is going to take place in rejection of Macri's policies and the G20. It will also stand against the accord signed between the IMF and Argentina.
Staying with news from Argentina, the Supreme Court has rejected an appeal by the indigenous leader Milagros Sala against her detention. Sala has been in prison or under house arrest for most of the last 2 years in connection with several charges. This appeal is related to the so-called eggs case, where she was accused of throwing eggs at the house of Geraldo Morales, the governor of Jujuy province. Sala says she was even present that day, and the case against her are political persecution. Colombian students continue to march to ask for increased funding for public universities. Students have been on a national strike for nearly 50 days. From all corners of the country, marchers are making their way to Bogotá, where labor unions, social organizations, and indigenous movements will join forces for a rally against tax reform. This is the 7th time students have taken to the streets because of a breakdown in the negotiations with the government. Students have condemned the excessive use of force by ESMAD, Colombia's anti-riot squad, both along the march route as well as on campus. The murdered Mapuche leader Camilo Catrillanca had been under surveillance since 2017. According to an investigation carried out by the Center for Journalistic Research, Catrillanca had been monitored since last year by the Carabineros Intelligence Service. He was shot last November 14, sparking outrage and protest. Due to the abuses Mapuche people continue to suffer by the Chilean state. In Guatemala, the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women had special significance, given the recent murder of Alejandra Ico with Quiche indigenous women gathering to demand violence for victims of femicide.
Lighting sacred fires. These indigenous Mayan women in Guatemala pay tribute to the memory of Ico Chub.
We women need to get together and demonstrate against what happened to her. We are lighting candles to ask for justice in Alejandra's name.
Alejandra was killed in a brutal way on November 9th in the Guatemalan municipality of Chisec by her partner, Mario Tutical.
She had been subject to violence for a long time and ended up as a victim of femicide. We want justice for our friend.
For these women, the murder of Alejandra reflects the situation of rising violence against women in rural communities.
When institutions do not take action, it's a big setback for us women. That's why we demand the judiciary to do their jobs with no ifs, buts, or excuses.
According to official statistics, in 2018, there have been more than 700 cases of femicide in the country. These figures could be even higher, as not all cases are properly registered.
We still justify violence against women. We normalize it. When a woman experiences a violent situation, society blames her.
During the march, women also rejected the use of violence against women in public spaces. They also wanted to highlight the sexual abuse accusations involving Guatemalan President Jimmy Morales, who had the case against him thrown out.
The proposed tax reform in Costa Rica continues to move towards approval despite the ongoing national strike that has lasted for over 2 months. Our correspondent in San Jose, Fernando Francia, brings us the details.
Costa Rica is still debating tax reform and how to apply legal frameworks to best deal with the fiscal crisis in the country. The Legislative Assembly is debating the reforms, but they're still waiting for all the reports they need to reach a decision. For 78 days, there have been national strikes against tax reform. Several educational institutions are demanding better treatment ever since the Education Ministry announced new austerity measures. For example, there are 2,400 teachers from schools across the country facing redundancies because they're not part of next year's educational plan.
Now, Peru's government is meeting with international media in an attempt to unlink itself from negative reports on drug trafficking control policies, which indicate that the Andean country is the largest cocaine producer in the world.
The VIDA is the commission in charge of managing Peruvian public institutions fighting drug trafficking. Its highest authority, Rubén Vargas, had to give an explanation following the publication of 2 reports from specialized offices for drug control in both Vienna and Washington. The report agreed on the fact that Peru's cocaine production has increased by 20%, growing from 410 tons to 490, the highest figure in 25 years.
Drug trafficking is a problem which needs to be controlled. I don't think we can give a reasonable deadline to finally overcome this issue. It is an international concern. Fighting drug trafficking doesn't just depend on domestic policy.
According to local and international research, 75% of Peruvian cocaine production takes place in the area between Cusco, Ayacucho, Huancavelica, and Junín.
We have more than 14 cocaine plants where coca paste is produced and exported to its main market, which is Brazil, and also cocaine chlorohydrate, which goes on to Western Europe and the United States. This makes us vulnerable and is still not handled by the state authorities. The 3 main goals we have are to counter money laundering, chemical supplies, and organized crime.
For expert Ricardo Soberon, the policies imposed by the United States against drug trafficking haven't worked at all. On the contrary.
We are battling different elements of a narco-state. We fight money funneling from drug trafficking into national politics. The violation of social actors' rights who experience this firsthand and who have no answers, as well as the state's inability to solve this problem.
Meanwhile, in Huamanga, Ayacucho, the capital closest to the drug zone, 106 credit unions are operating, of which only 5 are in government's spotlight.
Still in Peru, the country says it is ready to host the 2019 Dakar Rally next January. This will be the first time the competition will be held in just one country. The competition's top drivers attended the Peruvian embassy in Paris to hear the latest details. The 10-stage course is due to be 5,000 kilometers long, and 70% of the course is on sand. And for the first time, a Peruvian woman will participate in the Dakar Rally. The 24-year-old Gianna Velarde will compete in the motorcycle race. Velarde faces the challenge of since overcoming cancer. She says racing in this competition is starting a new chapter of her life. And we'll take another short break now. More news in a few.
The Pakistani journalist Tariq Ali examines the mass media influence promoted by imperialism. Get access to the analysis of the socio-economic and political life of the whole South America on our screen and platform in English. A critical place committed to the truth to determine the major events that transform the world today. Mondays, only on Telesur.
Welcome back. The Venezuelan Vice Minister Yuri Pimentel visited Kenya, where he met with the United Nations Human Settlements Program to speak on the experience of Venezuela's housing mission, which has benefited more than 2 million Venezuelans. The minister was greeted in Nairobi by Kenyan youth, sending this message of support and solidarity to the Bolivarian Revolution.
Viva Venezuela, viva! Viva! Viva Maduro, viva! Viva! Viva Chavez, viva! Viva! Viva, viva, viva! Viva! Viva Kenya, Venezuela, friendship, viva! Viva!
Citizens in Benai in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo have demonstrated against the murder of civilians. 6 persons were killed in the last attack by the ADF armed group. Military sources said this Tuesday the army and the troops of the UN peacekeeping mission began a joint operation against the group 2 weeks ago. But violence is sparking rage in the area as the election scheduled for the 23rd of December draws near.
The public figures of the city of Beni have chosen today's date to express their dissatisfaction and say no to the massacres. We want to see the international community through MONUSCO put an end to these massacres so that MONUSCO can liberate our city. They didn't come to Beni just to flower the city of Beni. We want to see them work to impose peace.
The South African opposition leader Julius Malema has officially laid criminal charges against the country's Minister of State Enterprises. The charges against Minister Pravin Gordhan include corruption, racketeering, perjury, money laundering, and many others. Gordhan has described the allegations against him as baseless, fake, and an attempt to derail him from combating corruption in state-owned companies. And the Senegalese Minister of Culture has made a call to France for the reinstitution of its artwork. This following a French report urging the return of African art treasures.
If they have decided to return these works permanently, we will find ways to recover them. If they have decided on another form of restitution, deposit or loan, we are ready to find solutions with France. We know we have works there, but I don't know the number, but if we have 10,000, we'd like to have the 10,000.
The European Court of Justice is to rule on whether the United Kingdom can reverse its decision to leave the European Union. Lawyers representing a group of Scottish members of Parliament have dragged the British government before the court. British parliamentarians are set to vote on the Brexit deal early next month. And a court in Crimea has ruled 2 months arrest for 12 of the 24 Ukrainian sailors captured by Russia. The crew members were detained for illegally crossing the Russian border and organizing a provocation in the Kerch Strait. According to the Ukrainian authorities, their vessels have the right to navigate the area according to international law, but Russia does not think so. Syria is celebrating its culture with a 7-day festival with a special tribute to the Syrian Arab Army in defeating terrorism.
It's the 60th anniversary of Syria's culture ministry, so the cream of the country's literary, art and music scenes are to be honoured for their work. The awards will be accompanied by a host of festivities.
Celebrations will showcase our multiculturalism. We are also celebrating a year in which the Syrian Arab Army has made great strides in its fight against terrorism, restoring security to many areas.
So this year's celebrations include paying tribute to the Syrian Arab Army who have fought to preserve Syria's rich culture and character. Those in attendance have shown solidarity with the soldiers in their fight against extremists.
Syria has won, and with this victory, so has our culture. A culture of life over death, of peace against war. We can proudly say this through our art.
In the celebration, we are sending a message to say that Syria is returning back to normal. We have won, and our ancestral culture has beaten terrorism, extremism, and ignorance.
Syria is considered a cradle of civilization. This war hasn't been able to erase thousands of years of history and diversity. This is a celebration of victory, and never before has art and culture been so symbolic.
Climate change is threatening the most significant symbol of Lebanon, cedar trees. In the country's mountains, a tiny insect is spreading and it's eating away at the tree's pine needles. The lack of humidity in the earth is increasing the plague. Up to 6,000 larvae per square meter have been found so far, and now the government has launched a program to replant 40 million trees. We've come to the end of this news brief. For these and many other stories, you can find them on our website at tellus-your-english.net. For viewers in Africa, we are on Starstat 461 in South Africa and 539 in Nigeria. And join us on social media. We are on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Tell Us Your English, I am Swingy Gray. Thank you for watching.